Understanding trends in the travel behavior of transportation disadvantaged populations is important for understanding how well the mobility needs of these populations are being met and for informing policy and transportation investment decisions. Research by the Small Urban and Rural Center on Mobility examined trends and geographic differences in travel behavior for these populations. The study examines and compares data for trip rates, miles driven, mode shares, and other behavior by analyzing data from the 2017 National Household Travel Survey, and it looks at data for different types of geographies, including rural areas. The study focuses on older adults, people with disabilities, and low-income individuals, while also providing comparisons based on gender, ability to drive, and geography. Mobility impairment is highly related to age, and older adults are much more likely to have a condition or disability that limits travel. Older adults with a disability make several changes to their travel, such as reducing day-to-day travel, asking others for a ride, or limiting driving to daytime. As people age, they're less likely to drive, and the number of trips taken per day decreases. Those in rural areas tend to take fewer trips per day on average. Trip rates are also related to income. People with lower income take fewer trips. Some differences can be shown between men and women. Younger women make more trips per day than younger men, but as age increases, this difference disappears and then reverses. While older men have traditionally traveled more than older women, this gender gap has been decreasing over time. People who do not drive take significantly fewer trips. The gap between drivers and non-drivers increases with age. People aged 85 or older take 2.8 trips per day if they drive, but just 1.1 trips per day if they do not. Similarly, people with a disability or condition that makes travel difficult also make significantly fewer trips per day. In general, there have been decreases in personal trip rates over the previous 2 decades, but that trend is mostly found among younger adults and not older adults. Miles driven also decreases with age, and while those in rural areas make fewer trips per day, they drive more miles due to a greater reliance on the automobile and longer travel distances. Similar to trip rates, miles driven is also related to income. Those with lower incomes in all geographic areas tend to drive fewer miles. Transportation disadvantaged groups are shown to be more likely to rely on public transportation. Even though young adults are generally more likely to use transit in urban areas, transit mode share in small towns is the highest for the oldest age groups. Transit mode shares are small in rural areas and small towns, but many older adults and people with disabilities rely on it. In rural areas, the transit mode share is about 7 times higher for those with a condition or disability. In other areas, transit mode shares tend to be about 3 or 4 times higher for those with a disability. People with low income are also more reliant on public transportation. Across all geographic areas, transit mode shares are the highest for those with the lowest income. Public transit mode shares were found to increase from 2001 to 2017 in all geographic areas. In rural areas and small towns, transit mode shares are quite small, but they more than doubled from 2001 to 2017, though there have since been some declines in transit use. Many services are increasingly using smartphone apps, and many emerging mobility options such as Uber and Lyft rely on such apps. Smartphone apps are increasingly making it easier to find and use transportation services. While the use of smartphones may have increased substantially in recent years among all population groups, the 2017 survey data showed that the use of smartphones for accessing the internet drops considerably with age. And there's also some differences based on income. The use of ride-hailing is highest among younger adults and somewhat higher for those with higher income. Urban areas have a much higher number of trips made by walking, biking, transit, and ride hailing, and lower driving rates and miles driven per person. The use of ride hailing is much lower in rural areas and small towns. Purchasing products online and having them delivered to your home is a potential strategy for overcoming transportation disadvantage. But online deliveries tend to be correlated with income, and many of the transportation disadvantaged groups are low income and they don't take advantage of it. While these new options provide increased opportunities, they're not a substitute for public transit for many of those who rely on public transit, especially in smaller communities with growing populations of older adults. For more information about this research, visit our website or contact me. My name is Jeremy Matson. I'm an assistant professor at North Dakota State University. I work for the Small Urban and Rural Center on Mobility, or SURCOM, which is a program of the Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute at North Dakota State. At SURCOM, we provide research and education for improving mobility in rural, small urban communities. Visit our website for more information about this research and other research projects, as well as our education programs and training opportunities.